Hello, for this afternoon I would like to talk to you about using multiple video perspectives in the classroom, using mobile devices. These will be able to give students more accessibility. Many students, especially deaf students, need this opportunity for education, and particularly students who perhaps have low vision, or in the classroom they have limitations in terms of the information. First, this technology has a goal to it, and that is primarily our target audience as the deaf students. Deaf students have some issues, and there is a low incidence of deaf students within college academic institutions, and that means that there are about 30,000 deaf students over the United States. And most of them are in one-on-one situations. They may only see one other deaf individual. It's very difficult for institutions to support technology for one student as opposed to a group within the classroom. Students need visual aids and visual technology. They need access to the information. And so today we're going to discuss technology that will give those students access. We don't want the institutions to have to worry about providing this information and the technology, so we're encouraging the use by individuals. Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, requires that all institutions provide access services like interpreters, captioning, and other things for deaf and hard of hearing individuals, and also other students as well, like low vision students. Perhaps they might need the screen closer so that they're able to access the information. Even with those services, we find that there's still a disparity in terms of the learning access in the classroom. The graduation rate is very different between individual students who can hear and individuals who are deaf. You can see that the deaf students have a 25% graduation rate. And primarily that is because they're not accessing auditory information and other typical ways that hearing students gather information. They're missing information within the classroom. And it isn't easy for students to participate. Deaf students, hard of hearing students, are often socially isolated. In a typical classroom, there are many information sources. You can see from the red blocks there on my slide that we have the interpreter, we have captioning, we have the PowerPoint slide, and the other students can also interact with each other to ask a question. So there's also a source of information that's not shown on my PowerPoint slide right now, and that's a lot of information to manage. The old style of a lecture really tended to just have one presenter with maybe a blackboard. But today we have many options. We have slides, we can have interpreters, we have PowerPoints, we have many things you can see on the slide. We have many, many opportunities for information gathering. What that means is that all students, deaf and hearing also, they don't have a clear visual field of all of the incoming information. Hearing students may listen to the information because they have auditory cues, and so they know how to transfer from perhaps the slide to the presenter to the captioning to whatever. But there's competition with that visual field. They know what the presenter says, they know the slide is going to come up, and so they have that time to look. They know what's coming on the next slide, perhaps. But the deaf student have to constantly move back and forth among the interpreting, and there is a lag time. So it's basically hard to do that switching, that visual switching. It's a very expansive location, really, the front of the classroom. And you can see on this slide the angles that are required for a deaf student to negotiate. So now we're talking a little bit about classroom design in terms of traditional auditory information compared with today. In a smaller classroom, or perhaps one that is deaf user friendly, if you will, would be more circular in nature, and then a deaf student can see everything all at one time. It's access friendly, if you will. One negative thing is that it's not necessarily the most efficient use of the space. You know, in old times, you know, we had an elevated classroom, if all of you remember that. And I really wish that we could see that more today, but we don't. And I'm not really sure why. But I think today what we have to deal with is using the technology, in a sense, to make it a virtually accessible room in the same way that an elevated classroom used to do visually for students. If we have the students seated in a situation in this way, we would typically have a video happening, a specific view of everything all at the same time. But we have visual blocks, and that makes for very difficult visual viewing. And in this case, we would have a videographer on the presenter, and then the students themselves could bring perhaps a video camera from their smartphone, and a tablet from their iTablets. We were able to capture the information close up and then stream it to the student. You know, that would be an example of the use of technology under those circumstances. We now have a first generation of the personal multi-video perspectives. On the screen, we would have many caption images coming in through the laptop, and they would all be captured. And it does work very successfully. And that we can then show everything that's happening in the classroom on one screen. This does work, but still, in terms of the close-ups, we have challenges. And the next step then is to go ahead and use the telephones and the tablets. One other advantage of this type of situation is that it's easy to watch on a small screen. Plus, you can type your own notes. So I'd like to go into a little bit of vocabulary and explanation before I move forward. So we have a video capture of each incoming source of information. And then we have an improvement of and a optimization of that explanation, of that information, to bring it in as it comes in a way that's appropriate. So we can show a condensed version of that information to the student and let them learn through their own empowerment and their own management of that information. So we're going to start with the student first and look at how the student can manage all of that information and how it's coming in on the screen. We did a study of 19 students and their use of access services, interpreters, captioning, and so forth. And we asked them to view this information and to give us a report on what they experienced. The feedback from that, let me hold one moment. They saw 2 different videos, and then they had a comparison. The first video was a single screen, the traditional way, for example, that we would have everything in front of you in a classroom, just on a computer screen. And then we had separate cameras capturing everything in close-up. And then we had the students do a comparison. The students reported that there was no significant difference between those two techniques. And I think that that was the reason that there was simply too much information to manage. It was easy for them to become distracted, and it was very difficult for them to prioritize the information. I noticed that the slide and the interpreter were most important for them for the visual information. And the presenter, really the students preferred to have them in a smaller screen. And so what we did was we started to compare, and we started to reduce and expand different screen sizes. So we actually shrank the size of the professor, and because the students still wanted to see the presenter, if there was a pause, they wanted to be able to look up and check what was happening with the professor in terms of the presentation. They felt that was important, but to just, most importantly, keep a solid view of the interpreter and the slides. They really liked that very much. And they did find, and we did find, that there was significant improvement in their viewing experience. And these are the results of the study. When we compare the different levels between the single video and the multi-video view, really there was no significant difference. But between the single view and the compressed view, we noticed that there were significant differences in the data received and significant improvements in the visual experience. Out of all 5 questions, we found that the students had better confidence with the compressed screening on the computer. And then we took a look at optimization of the use of mobile devices for captioning, for videoing, for screening, for streaming. And so we wanted to use the mobile devices for that. But you know, all of those requirements actually kill it. You know, they kill the battery life, there's just not enough bandwidth. The specifications have serious limitations. The technologies are limited with these type of uses. And so we want to try to improve that experience for the students and make for better viewing experience and better use in the applications of the technology. So we noticed that it was okay for us to ignore some features of the visual field, and that gave us an opportunity to reduce what we needed to caption for the video. And by decreasing the size and by focusing in, we were able to save about 20 to 35%. And when they were using their slides, instead of streaming that slowly or recording it slowly into different frames per second, we found that we could actually reduce the frames per second because we were focusing in on, zooming in on specific fields. Some information doesn't come in quite as rapidly as other information, and so we found that for slower information, the 10 FPS worked just fine. And we wanted to have it as smooth visually as it would be for the auditory information. In regards to the interpreter, we had to keep the FPS high for clarity. We also are trying to optimize the technology, improve the battery life, make sure that the battery didn't die during recording, and then the recording was successfully completed. Through the recording, we noticed that if we didn't make any changes in terms of the captioning of everything and the capturing of everything, we noticed that we were able to use, we used a lot of megabytes. We used over 600 megabytes. But whenever we tried to focus in on the specific characteristics, the specific needs, make our reduction, we were able to reduce the requirements to about 60 or 70 megabytes. Thereby increasing the lifespan of the technology. We improved battery life, and we improved the visual experience. So in summary, we believe it's best to use multiple videographers, video for an improved visual experience and for capturing the information. The students are also able to use their own phones for recording, their own laptops, and the students can type their own notes. So there are several important advantages to this method of using the technology. Also, in part, the technology is really cheaper. You know, the university does not have to purchase a lot of equipment. Many of the students already have this equipment available, and we can scale it up for use. Even with limitations of the device, we can use them successfully. And the students are able to access all the information they need. In the future, we do have some goals. We would like to be able to integrate classrooms. And we'd like to be able to use distance interpreting, distance education, and we would to use the telephones to access remote information. The interpreter may be in a remote location, but we would be able to access that through the technology. The student would always also be able to review the information at any time they want, any time, place, location. Often whenever a student is trying to scan the front of a classroom, they will lose information. For example, if they're watching the interpreter, then it's very difficult to get the information on the slide. But if they have this information captured and recorded, they can review it and watch it at a later time. They can focus on different aspects of the information at different times because they have it recorded. Most important things we have would be a close-up view. That information is very applicable to OCR. For the characters. It would be important for the characters. Then they're able to read it and change it. They can change the video to text, and then they can be able to search the lecture in terms of saving it for the future. They can categorize it and save it. That will also help them to improve themselves in the classroom, and we've seen traumatic really awesome improvements in the students and their performance in the classroom. So I'd like to open now for questions.
I think I might have missed a little piece of it. Is this a particular program that you created? So when you're talking about slides, is it a program that a student using this would have to have on their own laptop?
Yes. I use Java as the search engine. And they can link it to the phone, and it's an automatic download. They can watch it, and they can do it on their own. I mean, they can then bring it down to, they can just download it to their computer then, but they can do it through the telephone as well. They just have to have the software on the phone, that's all.
I think the technology is good. I just question, the sample size seemed pretty small, with 19 students. And if you...
Yes, right.
If you use the single perspective, and then the multiple perspective, and then the compact multiple perspective, it seems like as the students used it, they become more and more comfortable with it. So naturally, you would get better scores as they use the technology. So I'm just wondering how you accounted for that, skewing the effectiveness of each of those different ways of presenting the data.
I gave the students training, so they were comfortable with the technology and the use of it. We wanted them to make sure that they were comfortable. So we had them experience training beforehand. We didn't want to have to discard any data. We know that they were giving them a lot of information, and we did recognize they had to become familiar with the equipment. We know that 19 students is a small sampling size. it's very difficult to get enough students. Please remember, deaf students are dispersed throughout the country, and they're in one-on-one situations in mainstream settings. It's very difficult to get them together. We really would have to go to a college, university, or high school with a lot of deaf students, with a large population, and then we could be able to expand the study, and I plan to expand that study in the future.
But wasn't this done at RIT?
RIT does have a College of Technology for deaf students, and it is federally funded. There are about 1,500 students go there. But other than that, please remember that there are 30,000 deaf individuals nationwide, and about 90% of them are going to mainstream schools, mainstream universities. And in those situations, the teachers and the support staff have no experience with this type of technology or with deaf individuals, so it's very hard to know where the students are going, and so they are socially isolated.
Yeah, I understand that. It just seems like when you have 1,500 deaf students at the RIT campus, 19 seems like an awful small number of those.
I did this study before I joined the staff at RIT.
Okay.
So now I plan to do the study again. I have a lot more opportunities where I'm located now.
Go ahead.
I was a little confused about the optical character recognition. Was that all captions that were being written on a whiteboard or something like that?
Two things. We had OCR is meant to apply to either captioning or to slides. Often it's not practical to ask the teacher or the presenter to give you the slides. And I'm thinking of the student's perspective. You know, if they show up to do the recording and then they leave, under those circumstances, you know, we have to get the student to get the information from the source that they're able to collect in classes. It's very difficult for students to use the OCR, but if they're using a smartphone, they can set it right in front of the white screen, then it's better for them. It's a better view, and it definitely would improve the OCR and improve the accuracy there. And that's the approach that I'm pursuing at this point.
So is it up to then the student to have the technology, the recording technology, and to place that technology in the classroom in order to use it? Or are you saying institutionally they would set up the 4 locations?
I designed this from the student's perspective, bringing in their own technology that they already own, the smartphones, and setting it up in an easy way that's inobtrusive, so they're able to capture that information. Also, this would work for hard of hearing students. Sometimes they have FM systems, and they give that FM system to the teacher, and they attach it to the clothing. They're able to listen. So the idea is to really cut out the classroom distractions. Whenever someone is listening, a hard of hearing student is struggling to listen with the background noise. And that would be similar for a deaf student who's struggling to watch with a lot of visual distractions. So the goal here is to remove visual distractions and visual noise and to have a better viewing experience for the students. This can also apply to students who have low vision. They can get a high definition view of whatever they need in the classroom, well, the presenter or the slides or whatever is important to them. Okay. Thank you.